All right, welcome everyone. Thank you so much for attending our symposium today. My name is Sadie Crow for those that have not met me yet, and I am the CVCA project manager. And it is my pleasure to introduce you to our two keynote speakers, America Islas and Vanessa Albert-Moret. And they are coming to us from Family Builders by Adoption. And they are here to present on the topic of the well-being of LGBTQ plus children and youth and child welfare. So I'm going to pass it over to Vanessa.
Hi, everybody. Good morning. Thank you so much for having us here. I'm going to go ahead and start our presentation, but I really want to start off saying this is a judgment-free zone. Don't be afraid to ask questions. That's what we're here to do, is to learn. Okay. And here we go. So hi, my name is Vanessa Albert-Moret, and my pronouns are she, her. I work in the Youth Acceptance Project department in Family Builders. So my role is to provide support to caregivers of LGBTQ plus youth, and I'll let America introduce herself.
Yeah, good morning, everyone, and happy Pride. We think of June as Pride Month, but it's Pride Month in my world every day, every day, and in my family. My name is America Islas. My pronouns are she, her, ella. For those that speak Spanish, I'm the Permanency Program Director for Family Builders, and I'm also a YAP, Youth Acceptance Project advocate and trainer with as well. And I'm just excited to share space with you all. I'm looking forward to also share information about our LGBTQ plus community and then be able to answer any questions that you may have. Thank you, Vanessa.
All right, great. So I'm going to start with the first half of our presentation. I'm just going over just some information and some 101 info about gender identity and sexual orientation. So let's talk about terms. So SOGIE, if you see this acronym at the top here, SOGIE, that stands for sexual orientation, gender identity, and expression. Everyone has a SOGIE, a sexual orientation, a way that they relate to other people, or love other people, a gender identity, the sense of how you feel of a gender inside, and a way that you express that gender. Now, SOGIE versus the acronym LGBTQ, that refers to a particular population. LGBTQ stands for lesbian, gay, bisexual. The Q is questioning or queer. And what we like to say about queer, just a note, is that that was a derogatory term that the community has now reclaimed. And we just suggest to, if you don't identify it as yourself, to not use it. And if somebody says that they identify that way, and really just respecting the person in front of you, which is what it's all about. The GE stands for gender expansive. And you also might see different letters that the acronym come up differently. You might see LGBTQ2S, that stands for two-spirit. You might see LGBTQIA+, the I stands for intersex and A is asexual. But the plus really just shows it's to illustrate that there are an infinite amount of ways to relate to each other and to express gender. So I just explained that that's what the plus stands for. And it's important to remember that you don't need to know every single term because that plus is indicative of infinity. You can't make that many flashcards. What's really important is to believe the person that's in front of you when they're telling you who they are. And like Alok Menon, which is an advocate and speaker in the LGBTQ plus community, says compassion is more important than understanding. If you don't understand, that's okay. You can have compassion for your fellow humans. So no stress. And now we're going to look at a video that really illustrates the difference between sex, gender, sexual or romantic orientation.
You might not know there's a difference between gender and sex, but there's more to it than just he and she. Because gender is a spectrum, there are dozens of different gender identities, but there are only 3 sexes. Gender is a social construct, and sex is more of a science. Your sex is assigned at birth based on biological characteristics like chromosomes, reproductive organs, and other features that you're born with. If you have 2 X chromosomes, you're assigned female. If you have 1 X and 1 Y chromosome, you're assigned male. And if you have both male and female reproductive organs, you're considered intersex. Intersex people have an anatomy or physiology that does not fit into the socially constructed definitions of a female or a male body. Around 1.7% of the population is intersex. That's nearly as many people as there are redheads. Sometimes intersex people can have both ovaries and testicular tissue, or have higher hormone levels that are not typically seen in an assigned sex. Gender, on the other hand, is how you identify and express yourself to others. It's not a fixed state, but a continuum that can change over time. While most of popular culture focuses on 2 genders, there are many people who identify as non-binary, which means they don't identify as a man or a woman. There are also many cultures, past and present, that recognize more than 2 genders. For example, the Incas worshipped a dual-gendered god. Native American communities recognize 2-spirit people, who most tribes see as embodying a gender identity separate from men and women. And in indigenous Hawaiian culture, a person could be assumed male or female, but decide to take on a gender role opposite theirs, somewhere in between, or one that incorporates both masculine and feminine roles. Today, there are many gender identities and many ways to express them. There are over 50 gender pronouns like Z and Zim, and as of 2021, Facebook offers more than 50 gender options for users to choose from.
Hey, thanks for watching. You like to
So I want to invite everyone to tell me what stood out to you. You can put it in the chat. You can unmute yourself and speak out. We'd love to hear what first impressions were. If you learned anything. Don't be shy. What stood out to you? You can put it in the chat. Well, let's continue. I'm always open for questions or comments.
You got a couple,
Oh, I did. Oh, sorry. I can't see
responses,
the chat.
Vanessa.
Oh.
You want me to read them to you?
Yes, please. Yes, please.
So, one response was, I didn't know Facebook had expanded to offer so many gender options. Yeah, that's pretty cool.
Yeah.
I didn't know either until I watched the video and I went on Facebook to check to see if that was real. Another person said other cultures acceptance or acknowledgement of more than one gender. Yeah, that was something new as well for me, that I just started reading more about different cultures, or even just within my social circle, asking like, does that exist in your culture, right? The number of options that people can choose from or create is mind blowing to me. Yep.
Yeah.
That's kind of what Vanessa said, right? We can never, even Vanessa and I in this field, we can never know everything, right? So that's always that's always growing, and always people are adding more and more to that. The number of intersex people is about the same as number of redheads. Yep.
Mhm.
And what is the name of the video just shown? Will these resources be available later? Yeah, Jennifer, it's being recorded, and also I can put the links to the videos in the chat for you, so you all can open them and save them on your bookmarks if you want, or save the link. So I'll do that as Vanessa presents.
Great. Thank you so much. Thank you so much for those comments. Yes. It's mind-boggling, it's mind-blowing to see how many pronouns, how many ways to identify, and we're going to talk even more about that. So let's talk about non-binary. So binary notions of gender, biology, and sexual orientation, yeah, it excludes large swaths of the human spectrum. really it doesn't reflect humanity, the true face of humanity. It is mind-blowing to try to fit infinity into just a binary, two things. And also 1.2 million people living in the US identify as non-binary. So if you think about that, that's 1.2 million people that are not fitting into the binary choice. The binary choice of man, woman, feminine, masculine. But I might even want to change my language and thinking to say that our society does not fit humanity as it shows up, right? And I would even want to say that there's probably even more than 1.2 million people because it's not always safe to identify outside of the gender binary as well. So let's talk about the gender binary, the gender galaxy that's outside of the binary. So we're going to continue on this journey of thinking outside of the gender binary and more into the gender galaxy. It's a way to, this image is to help us understand gender outside of the binary, in that there are infinite ways to identify and to show up in the world. Are there any terms on here that are new to anybody? America, if anything shows up in the chat, would you mind letting me know? Because I can't see it from where I am.
Yes, so gender fluid, that was one.
Gender fluid. Yeah, gender fluid, that might be somebody who their sense of their gender changes. So gender fluid. So maybe that shows up as they use different pronouns at different times. Or maybe that shows up in the way they express their gender, or maybe it's just their sense inside changes and you might not know how they're expressing it, right?
There's third gender, agender, neutrals.
Third gender, that's actually, it can also be referred to as sacred gender. So that's in the Indian culture, it's referred to as third gender. It's a very powerful status to have, power to bless, power to curse. And it's called Hydra, is another word for that. And what was the other one was new choice. New choice is like null, like a null gender or neutral gender. So not male or female, not no gender, just neutral. And then another question. Oh, go ahead, America, please.
No, I was just reading the chat. Go for it, Vanessa.
One more thing I wanted to say about new choice is that sometimes the question that comes up after that is, well, then what's the difference between a neutral gender and a gender, not having a gender? Well, that you got to ask that person, right? To somebody who identifies as new choice, they might be able to tell you a little bit better about why a gender. It's really about that person's experience. So someone who is new choice might describe it differently to you than somebody else who identifies as new choice. Any other?
Yeah, can you repeat third gender, Vanessa?
Third gender, yeah. So third gender is in Indian culture. I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing it right. I was looking it up earlier, but it's spelled Hijra. And it's also can be referred to as sacred gender. So it's like a very sacred identity to have in Indian culture, very powerful. There's the story of Shikandi. That's like like an ancient story where Shikandi transforms into a man to fight in epic battles. And these are, that's just to drive home that humans have always existed. Our culture as humanity has always reflected diverse gender outside of the binary. I hope that was in more detail. for the commenter that asked. Any other comments? Questions?
No, that's it. And then Sadie also dropped the PowerPoint into the chat if y'all want to download it.
Oh, great. So thank you so much for those comments. And so again, this really driving home that there are many, many, many ways to identify in the gender galaxy. So let's talk about gender and colonialism. So as I was saying earlier, that since there were humans, there have been people that are outside of the gender binary. And colonization in a lot of cultures, in a lot of countries that were colonized, the history and culture of having more than two genders has been erased. And so the terms as transgender, gay, those are actually new vocabularies and words to describe how we've identified as humans since the beginning of time. And most Western societies have no direct correlation for this tradition, but again, gender expression is limitless. And let's think about our present world now in society. When you walk around, you might see a lot of things that reflect the gender binary. One example is male and female bathrooms. That's an obvious one, right? Anybody else? Feel free to unmute or put in the chat. What are other ways that when you walk out into the world, you see how things are divided into male and female?
You have sports, physical education
Yeah.
classes in schools, clothing sections,
Yep.
bathrooms, colors, lining kids up in school. Oh yeah, I hear that on my kids
Yeah.
all the time. Boys over here, girls over here. What about
Yeah.
everyone else? Baby stuff. Yeah.
Yeah, when I went to elementary school, we had boy and girl lines. There was also days where only girls could play on the playground and only boys could play on the playground. And that was the school's solution to bullying.
Diapers.
Diapers, yes. How about careers? Behaviors? Toys? Sometimes emotions can be gendered.
Yep, somebody just put emotions, health education, names, household chores.
That's a good one. Any other ones you see in there, America?
Yeah, parenting.
Yeah. Definitely. I was with one of the parents that I was working with, I was talking to him about how the gender binary, like how he has experienced when somebody told him he wasn't man enough. One of the things he said was, "Oh, men aren't supposed to cry." And I'm like, yeah, you see, that's actually a human thing. That's an example of how the gender binary can erase humanity, even for, in that case, a cis man.
Yeah, we have a comment. Diapers have a physical reason with extra padding in different locations, though, as we talked about, like being boy and girl type of, or being gendered, the diapers, right? Jokes about gender roles, colors, women pay more money for haircuts and hair products. Pink
Yeah.
pack. Even razors, right? You have razors in the women's section at Target, right? Or the quote unquote male section at Target. People using your dead name to hurt you.
Yes, we're gonna talk about that too. We're actually gonna hear directly from some youth.
Yeah, these are great. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much. Those are all really great comments. There we go. Okay. So more about non-binary identities. So non-binary is an umbrella term, but generally it's any gender that isn't exclusively male or female. So if we want to break it down, non meaning not, binary meaning a binary, so two things. So it's not just two things. So some non-binary people might feel a mix of both male and female. They might feel more on the male side, if you want to think of it as male and female on either side of the spectrum. Some might feel more male, but like maybe some feminine qualities, or maybe more female with masculine qualities, or completely outside of that altogether. And there are other terms for non-binary. So some people use gender queer. Some people use gender expansive, gender non-conforming, gender awesome is a good one. One of the youth I was working with, I was giving a survey for them, and gender queer was one of the options to identify. So excited. They said they literally jumped up and down and said, "That's me, that's me." Like, so excited to check, to see themselves reflected. That's the power of representation, just reflected in a form. So it really, that's really just an example of, again, like how our binary notions of gender can make people feel excluded, so that young person, it was so exciting just to see genderqueer on a form. So we're gonna open it up to y'all again. This is kind of a little exercise. It's not a trick. Just let me know what you see. The non-binary quote look. What do you notice? You might recognize some people. Really, any observation. There's no wrong answers here.
Someone put in the chat, Vanessa, there is no one look.
Yeah.
They're all human, all multicultural. Everyone is just human.
Different cultures, all human. Yeah.
Universal.
Mm-hmm. Can y'all see my arrow when I move it around?
Yes.
Here? Okay. So this is Alok Menon that I was talking about earlier, a very talented writer, speaker, comedian, fashion icon, who the quote is compassion over understanding. That's who I was talking about. Yeah, and everybody is correct. Like I said, it wasn't a trick. Everybody's correct. It's through time. So you see people from different time periods all the way up to present day. Also, some people, you might not be able to tell they're non-binary. I remember when I first saw this slide, I didn't know that Miley Cyrus is non-binary. So you can't tell by looking. There is no look. Exactly. Somebody said it right out the gate. So now we're going to hear from Micah.
Hi, my name is Micah. I am 15, and I'm here to answer some questions about being non-binary. So for me, being non-binary is really just like figuring out what identity fit me best. I realized that I wasn't really a guy or a girl. I didn't fit the gender binary, and being this way just feels better to me. I use gender-neutral pronouns, they and them, and I use gender-neutral language to describe myself. So the most commonly used gender-neutral pronouns are they and them. They are gender-neutral, which means they don't really have either male or female labels attached to them. They and them have actually been used as singular pronouns since around the 14th century.
You probably use it as a singular pronoun all the time without recognizing it. Like if there's someone across the parking lot, you can just say like, hey, I think they double parked. There are some pretty funny alternatives like they's and gentle thems, which I quite like. But you can also just say everyone or folks or y'all. A really nice alternative actually that I heard was date mate instead of boyfriend or girlfriend. When I first came out, yeah, my brother immediately started calling me his sibling. Figuring out that I was non-binary is one of the hardest things for me, at least to put into words. I do remember just thinking that there is something wrong with me, that I am the weird kid for wanting to hang out with like only the guys or only the girls when they shouldn't be. But it's different now. It's correct in a way that is weird and new, and I can find other people who feel what I'm feeling, and I can talk to them, and I can make friends. For me, finding this particular label has been pretty amazing.
So what stood out to you after you watched that video? First impressions.
Somebody said, that's beautiful.
Yeah. Seeing a young person being confident in who they are, it's very beautiful.
Date mate with the happy face, Vanessa.
Yeah.
We already have so many terms we can use in place of gendered ones.
Yes. I really like ladies and gentle thems. That's just fun to say too. Anybody else have observations, feelings that come up?
Yeah, somebody says, they use they, them, so I like their joyful confidence. Yes, thank you for correcting yourself. Awesome. Love that in the chat. So
Yeah.
it takes practice, definitely. I love just how this youth wanted to share their experience, and it made me want to smile because of their joy. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I've seen this video a lot, and I honestly don't get tired of watching it.
And I think just to add to that, we hear of like even just like there's stigma around like the LGBTQ plus community, right? So a lot of things we see as very negative, or we hear very negative information or videos, that to see Micah come out and be like happy about who they are and authentically can be confident about that. I love that, because we don't have many videos that are positive like that about our community. So other people said, I have a 12-year-old non-binary child, and they have had the same experience. It's been liberating and freeing to be accepted by our family and their school. Oh, that gave me the chills. Thank you for sharing that. It makes me think of how important community and representation is.
Yes, definitely. And this may seem like an obvious question, but I think it helps to ask is, why does Micah need to have a video where Micah is talking about their identity? Because we're not interviewing cis youth about their identity. It's because cis youth, that's considered for our society normal, right? But as we can all see, Micah is normal. Micah is a normal, confident child. And just like how Micah was saying, it's correct that they feel correct in their identity. And we want that for all of our kids. Thank you so much for all of the wonderful comments. I really appreciate it. Okay, let's talk about pronouns. And I always skip past the slide. I actually just kind of want to, because it's just the title, but I really like it. I like how it's my pronouns are they, them with a non-binary flag, respect gender pronouns. You can even get a pin that says, ask me about my pronouns. Anyway, let's continue. But we're going to actually start off by hearing directly from youth about the importance of pronouns and what it means to them.
Just because I may present more femme doesn't mean that I'm any less they, them.
You know what, that thing where you're eating a meal, but you're not really eating a meal, you're just kind of picking at food on the counter. My family and I were doing that one night, and I just kind of looked at them and said, hey guys, I'm non-binary. I don't have a gender.
In my opinion, gender is a universe. It is a broad spectrum of planets and stars and sky that truly cannot be contained into a binary.
My pronouns are they, them, theirs, and that's a non-negotiable. And they were all kind of like, okay. I think one of the main reasons pronouns are so important is because other than our name, it's one of the main ways that people identify and call us.
My pronouns are personally very important to me. Growing up, enculturated into kind of a system that really subscribes to toxic masculinity, I was always uncomfortable with being called dude, what's up, man? I was so bad at dapping people up, like, how like guys like do that whole like that thing. I was so bad at that, and it just like I felt very alienated every time someone would do that to me.
So when someone identifies with a pronoun, they're essentially taking their little piece of that broad universe and identifying with that. And so in using their correct pronouns, we're validating that, yes, you are right in your identity and you are important and we're respecting you.
Coming into terms with my gender queer identity has been one of the most challenging but also rewarding things that I've done.
Laverne Cox kind of famously said, misgendering a trans person is an act of violence. And it is. It's an act of psychological violence. It's a denial of somebody's personhood and a complete refusal to acknowledge their identity, whether intentional or not. And so it is something that is entirely wrapped around our everyday lives. So just walking into a restaurant and hearing someone say she, will happen within 2 seconds of me entering, which doesn't happen about any of my other identities. They're not going to be like, oh, you straight person, that doesn't happen. But automatically someone will make assumptions about gender, which translate into pronouns, which mean that I will hear over and over again people saying something about my identity, which is false.
I think a lot of people associate expression with identity, and sometimes that's not the case. Oftentimes I'm in situations where I'm not the most safe being able to express my gender identity, and in those cases, even in those instances where I'm wearing basketball shorts or sneakers, you can't take my gender identity away from me because that's mine and not yours.
So many different options for who you are and how to define that. So when someone chooses a personal pronoun that they identify with, using that pronoun is a form of respect and a form of validation that, yes, this is your rightful identity and I will respect that.
And I know personally when I get misgendered, by strangers, it's one thing, but it's especially painful when it's people who are close to you. So when my parents misgender me, it's a knife in my heart because they're the people whose opinions matter more to me than anybody else's. And not knowing how to combat it. It is constant and it is such a prevalent part of our society that being misgendered happens countless times in a day, and that builds up really quickly, and it can really be difficult for a person to hear over and over again because it invalidates your identity over and over and over again. Pronouns are important because they are the smallest and easiest way that you can acknowledge somebody's identity.
And I also don't like that people call them their preferred pronouns because it's also not a preference. It's who they are. You need to use those pronouns. It's literally an extension of my arm or my leg. It's just as a part of me as a vital organ. My identity, although you can't see it, still needs to be validated just as much as you would validate the fact that I have 5 fingers or 5 toes.
Yeah, any thoughts from the video? First impressions, feelings? One thing that comes up sometimes after I show this video is people feel like, oh, okay, using the wrong pronoun or misgendering is an act of violence, and people sometimes will think back to a time that they used the wrong pronoun, and feelings might come up about that. You might feel embarrassed, you might feel ashamed, some people might even feel irritated, like, I can't keep track, I didn't mean it. I didn't mean it that way. I wasn't trying to disrespect. And those are normal feelings. But what we really want to show, or what we really want to drive home here, is that you don't need to work those feelings out with the person that you misgendered. It's not their responsibility to regulate yourself or to make you feel better about it. You can really sit down with yourself or another trusted person that has the space and energy to talk to you about it. And I'll also want to give an example of, this is of me. So I really love this author who goes by they, them. It's someone on the internet. And whenever I was talking about them, I would use she, her all the time. And I was really like, why do I do that? And when I sat down and thought about it, it's because I really identified with their writing and I was using she, her. And no one else could have done that work but me, right? So it's really important if you find yourself continuing to use the wrong pronoun or misgendering someone, really think about it. Like, what am I perceiving about this person that's making me use the wrong pronoun or use the different name?
You have a comment in the chat, Vanessa.
Sure.
Somebody shared, I went to a symposium last Friday and they were talking about the term preferred as well. And it was a new thought for me that while it might be something that is supposed to be kind, it could be disrespectful to someone.
Yeah. Thank you for highlighting that in the video. That, the idea that it's not a preferred pronoun, it just is. Yeah. And I've also heard that about identify as, using identify as, and kind of with the same idea of like, no, just that just is who they are. And I'm actually still changing my language there. Just like America had mentioned earlier, as just we are constantly learning.
Another comment, it made me realize I need to work on our agency forms to take that off. Yes, good point. And also support staff, right? So if your team's already using that, right, it's like we're implementing a change that we got to give a lot of background information, or you share what you learn here, so it could be a better understanding and a more, I would say, like more community change, right? To where we start educating people, we start even educating our clients, or having these important conversations about why that's no longer on the form, and giving clients an opportunity, or the people we're serving, to self-identify, right? To authentically identify. Maybe they jump out of the seat like Vanessa's client, right? And say, oh, I'm being seen here, I'm being heard here. So thank you.
Absolutely.
Sorry, Vanessa, I didn't mean to interrupt you.
No, that's great, actually. And because that is exactly what this slide is about. It's about creating an environment or a space that is inclusive. So some people that believe that cisgender means someone who's not transgender. Cisgender means someone who's sex assigned at birth. They identify with the gender and the sex that they were given. So when someone is born, the doctor looks at the baby and sees a vagina, it's a girl. Sees a penis, it's a boy. So that's sex assigned at birth. But as people develop, they may not align with that gender that they're assigned. And so for cisgender people to use pronouns, it actually normalizes just sharing pronouns. It creates a safe environment, a safe space. And I also want to like expand on what a safe space looks like. A person can be a safe space. You can be a safe space for somebody. And some people might say, well, I'm cisgender. You can just tell what my pronouns are by looking. But as we were looking at earlier, you actually can't tell someone's gender just by looking. So it's not a bad idea to just use pronouns. And if you're only asking people's pronouns who you're perceiving as part of the LGBTQ community, or they might use different pronouns, if you're only asking their pronouns, it kind of singles them out. So it's good to include your pronouns like in your name on Zoom, or in your email, or in your voicemail. In my voicemail, I know that I've invited people to share pronouns. There's all kinds of ways. You can wear a pin. So here's some pronouns that you might be familiar with. A lot of them: he, him, she, they. Z might be one that more of us are not familiar with. Some people don't use pronouns. Some people just want you to use their name. And some people don't want you, they don't want to share their pronouns. Identifying information is confidential. And it's okay to practice, and it's encouraged to practice. Z, I believe these two are pronounced the same, Z and Z. And A are some common gender neutral pronouns. You can practice with each other. And this is actually a little resource where you can practice using pronouns. Can y'all see my screen right now? Okay, just real quick. I'm gonna select the Z pronoun. And
Oh, we can't see you doing it, Vanessa.
Oh, you can't? Okay,
No.
fine. There, can you see this?
Yes.
Okay, so if you click on that link, which we can put in the chat if you want to practice, or America, would you?
Yes, I'll put it. Yeah.
Okay, so you can practice. So let me. Z really loves burgers. It gives you some examples. Those cats belong to here. This is the Z pronoun. Here bedroom is upstairs. Z's all by herself. So it gives you examples and then you can practice. Z loves cheese a lot. Did I get it right? Yeah. I called here yesterday. What if I put the wrong one? No big deal. It just turns red and shakes a little bit. You can just practice. Okay, I'm gonna go back. Okay.
Vanessa, can I add something on the pronouns real
Yes,
quick?
please.
I would like to also just share with you all working in like community mental health and working with like a wraparound team and working with like a big group of a team. I like to, if a youth or somebody always comes out and shares their pronouns with me, I like to always just ask and first validate the fact that they shared their pronouns with me and say, hey, thank you so much for trusting me with that or sharing your pronouns with me. And then I also like to ask, especially working with youth, like, does your therapist know that you use these pronouns, or who have you shared your pronouns with? Just so I could be respectful of that youth and not out them to somebody that they might have not been out to or that they might have not shared their pronouns with. So I just like to be very respectful and just always ask to be on the safe side and not assume. I learned the hard way. I worked with they had a therapist, so I talked to the therapist, got a release of information, and I shared the pronouns, and the therapist was like, my client doesn't use they them pronouns, and I was like, oh shoot, right? So it's a matter of fact of like just being very transparent and saying, hey, I'm going to have conversations with maybe your parents or your therapist. What pronouns do you want me to use while talking to them, right? It's just out of respect. So I like to share that because I've made the mistake of not asking and just assuming that people in this kid circle knew and they didn't, and it caused harm, right? So just like to share that tip.
Yeah, thank you, America. It is important, yeah, when a youth shares, their identity, to consider that they might not be out everywhere in their life. Like in the video that we watched earlier about the pronouns, I think one of the young people were saying that sometimes they're just wearing like basketball shorts and people might perceive them as male. But it's also important to consider sometimes it's not safe to express gender. So even though someone might be wearing clothes that may signify to you that they are cis or they use a certain pronoun, you might still not know, and it might not be because that's just how they're dressed. It actually might be safety. So you really never know, because some people it's not safe to go to work expressing your gender. So somebody might be just getting off work and they can't, it's a threat to their livelihood in a lot of cases. Do we have anything in the chat before I move on?
Nope, I put the link to that pronouns practice if y'all want to practice.
Okay. So the by umbrella, it's really, we're not going to go over every single term, but it's really just to show again that there are so many ways to identify. And it's okay to not know them all. We can Google, but really what's the most important is to believe and respect the person in front of you. So this might look familiar with some changes. The sexuality galaxy. So again, what I really like, how I like to describe this slide is that there are an infinite amount of ways to love. There are an infinite amount of ways to connect with each other, to relate to each other. And it doesn't have to be just one way. As long as all parties are consenting and safe and healthy, there are so many ways for us to connect as humans. Are there any terms on here that are new to folks?
Gray asexual or gray sexual?
Yeah, gray asexual. So I actually will start by, some people might not know what asexual is. So if we really just break it down, the prefix A is not or no sexual. So it's like no sexual attraction. So someone who's gray asexual might sometimes experience sexual attraction. So like the gray is an indicator of it's a sometimes or maybe under certain circumstances, but they still identify as asexual, but the gray is just to signify that it's not all the time.
We have a couple more, Vanessa, here.
Okay.
Demi-romantic.
Yeah. Oh, demi-romantic. Usually it's demisexual that we get questions for. Demi-romantic. So demi, I'm not going to break down the prefix because it's a little more complicated, but demi-romantic is about needing to have a bond with someone or a certain trust before you have romantic feelings. So somebody who's demi-romantic may not experience romantic feelings unless they feel comfortable, respected, they form a bond. Maybe there needs to be a certain amount of time that goes by before they have those feelings. And I'm going to go ahead and pivot to demisexual. It's very similar in that before someone feels sexual attraction, there needs to be a bond or a certain level of comfort. But again, it's somebody who identifies as demisexual or someone who identifies as demi-romantic. Someone else might identify the same way, and they might give you two different answers. It might be similar, it might be different. And some people here might be like, oh, yeah, that's me, actually. I do need to feel more comfortable before I have those feelings.
Yeah, I'm going to give you the other ones, Vanessa.
Yeah.
Okay, there's polysexual and phrasexual.
Polysexual is really, that's one we can break down with the prefix. Poly meaning many. Sexual, so maybe identifying. I use that word again, see? So someone who experiences sexual attraction to many people. What was the other one that was asked?
Phrasexual? Is that
Gray?
maybe they meant gray sexual.
Oh,
Yeah.
gray sexual. I think we talked about that, right? The
yes.
gray asexual. Yeah. Is there anything more about gray asexual? Maybe there's a lingering question. Any other terms in the chat?
No. Oh, aromantic.
Aromantic.
Oh, wait, and then
Oh.
Leah said to phrasexual. Phrasexual as being sort of the opposite of demisexual.
What? Say that again? I didn't quite hear that.
Phrasexual as being sort of the opposite of demisexual. Learn something new, Leah. Thank you.
Interesting.
Yeah.
I never thought of it that way. That's what's really cool. That's why I really enjoy people's comments, because it's a great way to just continue to learn and think differently. And the cool thing about it is you don't necessarily have to worry about being wrong, because if somebody's unless you're describing someone's identity and it's, you know, against what they're what they're telling you it is. But it's really cool to have these conversations. Thank you so much for these comments. I do want to ask, actually, this is really for me. Can someone define romance or the romantic? What does that mean? Some people might be thinking long walks on the beach, candlelight.
We have some responses: connectedness beyond surface level connections.
Mhm.
Romance is the expression of love. Show attention or love to something or someone.
Mhm. Yeah, that's really great. I've just been thinking about how different that would be, like someone's idea of romance. And so I always like to ask. I've decided that I just want to ask people so that I can like learn more about what that means. I mean, I have my own ideas about it, but there's so many people on this planet. I'd love to know. Okay, thank you so much, everybody. Okay, I'm going to turn it over to America to talk about why does all of this matter?
Yes, thank you, Vanessa. Do you want me to share my screen now, Vanessa, or?
Sure, yeah.
I think this was still under you, Vanessa, but you want me to take over?
Yes.
Okay, so let me share my screen. Thank you, everybody.
There, you should be able to share here.
Move all my stuff here. Awesome. So why is all this information important? So we know that nationwide, so just, you know, kind of like a trigger warning, I'm going to share a lot of statistics and numbers with you regarding our LGBTQ plus population. You all might be familiar with these numbers or not, but just something for you to kind of marinate with. So all this information is important because nationwide, 34% of youth in the child welfare system identifies as LGBTQ plus. That's 1 in 3 youth. So if you think of your caseload or you think of how many youth you served, there's one of those 3 youth, one in 3 youth are in these numbers. 1 in 5 young people in U.S. juvenile justice facilities identify as LGBTQ plus, and 85% are youth of color of these 1 in 5 young people. And those are only the young folks that are coming out or have said that they're part of the LGBTQ plus community. Of the 1.6 million youth who are homeless in the US, 40% or more identify as LGBTQ plus. And LGBTQ plus youth are disproportionately represented in the CSEC population due to high levels of homelessness. Again, these numbers are only based off those that have self-identified. And the numbers are probably even higher just because a lot have not come out to say they're part of this community. Stuff here. So the Trevor Project did a survey, a national survey on LGBTQ plus youth, and their mental health was represented. So there's about 28,524 LGBTQ youth across the US who were part of this survey. This was in 2023. And the youth were from ages 13 to 24. And this is the data that came from this survey. And you all can have access to this survey. If you Google Trevor Project, they've had their survey online and you can read it more in detail. We took some of the information out just to share with you what the outcome was of this survey. So 14% of LGBTQ respondents attempted suicide in the past 12 months, including more than 1 in 5 transgender and non-binary youth. So these youth did not just only think about wanting to take their life or have suicidal thoughts, they actually attempted suicide in the past 12 months. 46% of LGBTQ youth reporting having seriously considered attempting suicide in the past 12 months. That's almost 50%. 28% of LGBTQ youth who experienced housing instability reported a suicide attempt in the past year. And nearly 56% of transgender and non-binary youth did not receive wanted mental health care due to the concerns related to the lack of LGBTQ competence of their provider. So more than half of transgender non-binary youth did not receive services, mental health services, because they didn't feel like their therapist was a safe provider or their therapist was affirming, or they can come and talk about their authenticity, right? I'm a clinician at heart. I'm a licensed marriage family therapist. So reading this number makes me feel like, what can I do to bring this number down, right? What can I do to help make my spaces or my services more affirming, more welcoming to those, so that number can go down. That is a very high number. The Trevor Project also a couple years ago did this survey, and these numbers were lower. So as the years gone by, these percentages have gone up higher, unfortunately. So this matters, right? How we show up in spaces and how we show up for folks it's life-saving, right? By just using the pronoun, by just using people's names, by showing people that they belong somewhere and they're safe with you. So help me bring these numbers down. Some important reminders about LGBTQ plus youth. So LGBTQ plus youth in foster care are 3 times more likely to attempt suicide. So even just an LGBTQ plus youth that has entered the foster care system for even one day, they're already 3 times more likely to attempt suicide. 38% of LGBTQ youth, foster youth of color, reported a past suicide attempt in the past year. And 45% of transgender and non-binary foster youth reported a suicide attempt in the past year. And nearly 1 in 4 Black LGBTQ plus youth in foster care reported a suicide attempt in the past year. And attempted suicide or suicide attempt is highlighted here. For me, that's super important. I used to think, oh, LGBTQ plus youth and foster care or transgender youth or non-binary youth or gender expansive youth, they are more likely to think about taking their life. Well, no, they're just not thinking about it, right? And I like to highlight this. They're actually attempting it, which is something for you to look at. In the same survey, so in the same Trevor Project survey that I just gave you these results, there were good things that came out as well, right? Good information. Through the survey, we found out that transgender and non-binary youth report having their pronouns respected by all or most of the people in their lives, attempted suicide at half the rate of those who did not have their pronouns respected. So by just using somebody's pronouns, you're already saving lives. Teens who perceive parental support regarding gender identity were 93%, that's almost 100%, 93% less likely to attempt suicide than youth who do not perceive parents as supportive. So working with family members, working with the teens support system, one supportive adult, right? One affirming adult can change and can save these kids' lives. Parents and families who struggle with their child's sexual orientation or gender identity need support to become the parents that their LGBTQ plus children need them to be. A lot of the times we focus a lot on the youth, the LGBTQ plus youth, and we forget about families and what families need to be able to support them and help them through this process. Just like youth come out, families come out, and we need to find a holistic, a full family support to help them through this process, and it does make a difference. I am now going to share with you, this is a video. You're going to hear from LGBTQ plus and gender expansive foster youth. Project Flare made this video, and I'm just going to play it for you.
I identify as a trans male.
I identify as pansexual.
I identify as gender fluid and I use they them pronouns.
I identify as bisexual.
I identify as a transgender male, also gay and foster youth.
I kind of started to think about it when I was about 9 years old, and then when I was 11 is when I first came out to myself.
I was born as a female, but I've never really felt that way ever since I was little, ever since I can remember, really.
Last year I was identifying as transgender, but then I started realizing I don't know if I'm quite there yet.
People were telling me, no, you're a girl, and I was like, no, I'm not. I know who I am. And then it got to a point where I was like, wait, do I know who I am?
Identity is something you have to discover yourself. Nobody can make it for you. You have to make it yourself.
It makes me very unique. That's what I know.
For me, acceptance is really looking at someone and realizing no matter who they identify as, what they're going through, you're still gonna have that care for them. You're still gonna help them out when they need it. You're still gonna be there for them.
Being like welcomed and being like cared for.
A lot of foster homes just won't accept LGBT youth.
You never know, is this family gonna accept me? Are they gonna be okay with me being transgender, gender fluid?
And that's where my identity struggled too, because I was like, okay, well then, whose kid am I? Where is my home? Where do I belong?
It's been hard not to like compare myself to other people.
I was called a faggot. I was called a dyke.
You don't belong here, tranny, faggot.
I was depressed, I was lonely, I was hopeless, I felt like nothing. I felt empty, I felt like nothing mattered. To me, it's amazing.
It's felt like a safe haven for me. After so many years of like hiding and being cautious, I finally get to actually express who I want to be.
Feels like I'm at home, like I'm free to be who I want to be and be as loud as I want. There's always going to be people that will understand you and will feel like home eventually. Like you'll find your place.
You will get through this. It won't last forever.
If you are struggling or if you need someone, seek them out. You don't have to hide. You don't have to suffer.
It's okay to be scared, and you're gonna be scared. But remember that no matter what, you're not alone. You're not.
There's always someone out there who does care about you.
What are your thoughts about the video? What stood out? And Vanessa, maybe you can help me with the chat, please.
Yeah, any first impression?
For me, I'll share, Max always gets to me when you said, what do you think about, or something about acceptance? And then Max just like smiles and takes a deep breath, right off, like, like it's like a bag of bricks was taken off of their back, right? Of when the word acceptance came to their life.
Mhm. Yeah, we have a comment that says beautiful video and message.
Mhm.
Yeah. Share Your Flair was created by TLC, Child and Family Services. Just FYI. We've got another comment. Just their honesty and sharing our spaces that accept us in their world. Yeah. Heartbreaking to, there's another comment. Heartbreaking to hear that some foster families won't accept me. So who am I and where do I belong? Yeah. Yeah, it's a whole other layer of othering, right? So our youth in foster care are already separated from their families. There's already a separation that occurs, and then there's an additional compounding othering, being a part of the LGBTQ community, wondering, am I going to be accepted? Do I fit in? It's a specific intersection there. I don't see any more comments.
Okay, thank you, Vanessa. Thanks, everyone. So a few key reminders here. Variations of sexual orientation, gender identity, gender expression are part of the normal spectrum of human diversity. The increased risk faced by LGBTQ plus youth are not inherited to their identities, but stem from the stressors of prejudice, discrimination, rejection, and mistreatment. We think that if you have a youth who's LGBTQ plus, it's because that's why they're feeling these things, or that's why they're behaving this way. Not necessarily, right? It's trying to move away from that, and also seeing that if there's rejection, there's mistreatment from family members or from their support system. Maybe there's discrimination happening. Like all children, LGBTQ plus children thrive and succeed when families, schools, and communities support and nurture their evolving identities. Efforts to change a young person's sexual orientation or gender identity are ineffective, unnecessary, and harmful. We really want you to try to approach this, approach your work and your everyday and this do no harm principle. Showing up and really being, like Vanessa said, compassionate rather than trying to comprehend why they're identifying or dressing this way or pronouns they're using or why they want to be called a specific name, right? Really just coming from a place where you're curious and you're wanting to do no harm, right? And really get to know the youth that you're serving or the individual that you're serving. A young person's SOGI, sexual orientation, gender identity, expression, cannot be understood separately from their race, ethnicity, class, ability, or immigration status, which together confer a mix of disadvantage and privilege that impacts their experience, opportunities, and health status. I like to share too, right? You can't really get, for example, you wouldn't be able to really get to know me if you separate who I culturally identify with Latinx, my gender identity, woman, and then also being part of the LGBTQ plus community, right? So I wouldn't be who I am without all those different layers of who makes me. So just really, really try to get to know people as a whole. We have a 10-minute break here. So go ahead and take a 10-minute break and come back at 10:20 so we can finish up our rest. 10:20. No, you're okay. First you mute me, Sadie, in the beginning when I joined, and now you're like talking over me by recording. I'm just kidding. All right, let's get started, everyone. Welcome back. I'm gonna go ahead and share my screen. Okay. So we're going to talk about now best practices to meet the needs of LGBTQ plus youth who are experiencing foster care. So I'd like to start with the basics. Let's talk about your office, or if you're working out remotely, and things that you can do to help LGBTQ plus children and youth know that you're a safe person, or your space is safe. I think of the basics, but sometimes we lose track of the little things that make a difference, right? So I'll talk about by working remotely. I used to do in-home visits when I used to do the therapy. I used to be a clinician, and I had a clipboard or I had my notebook. I remember having my lanyard with a little rainbow pin on it, or ask me my pronouns pin on it. I remember my clipboard, I used to have a sticker that says even just like, this is a safe zone with me, or just including stickers that welcome everybody. I know we're talking about just LGBTQ plus youth right now, but even a sticker that represents children of all different cultures, right? Like on my clipboard, I remember having that. I also remember in my office space, used to have a little, and I still have it here. I work out of my garage, but I have like a little rainbow flag, right? It's not like anybody comes into my garage when I'm working, but I just like to have things that remind folks when we were in person, right? A rainbow flag, a sticker, a poster that says everyone's welcome here, even the equality sticker, or saying that you're an ally, an LGBTQ plus ally. You don't have to be part of the community to be able to be a safe person or somebody that others can trust. I would like to share that when I used to have like kids come into my office, or I used to go out to the homes, kids used to tell me, "Oh, you're gay?" And I used to look at them and I'm like, well, that's interesting. Why are you asking that? And this was before I had my hair shaved this way, or, I used to dress I used to dress more feminine looking than masculine, but I used to be like, oh, that's interesting, because they would catch me off guard. And I was like, I was curious. Why are you asking that? Why does that matter to you? And they would say, well, you have a rainbow sticker, so that means that you're gay. And I'm like, well, no, not necessarily. It means that I welcome and I love everyone, no matter if you're lesbian, gay, bisexual, trans. And that would start a conversation, right? They would ask me, oh, what does transgender mean? Or you said intersex, what does that mean? Right. So even just naming that and allowing kids or youth that you're serving to ask, what is that? Or why do you have that sticker? Or why do you say your pronouns if you're not part of the community? I like to just acknowledge that how I show up for you, I show up for anybody, no matter how they identify or how they're represented in the world. So I just like to start off with that. Also too, like, oh, go ahead.
Oh, we have a comment that says flags in your office with a smiley face.
Yes, that makes a difference. I like to also just share. I have a wife and two beautiful daughters, so I'm part of the community. And that does make a difference. I remember growing up and going into like the counselor's office at school, or going to like therapy as a teenager. I didn't see a rainbow flag in my therapist's office, and that would have made me feel a lot better of just being like, okay, I don't know if she's gay, but I think she'll be a safe person for me to talk about what I'm feeling inside, right? Something that if it's uncomfortable, and that's the reality, right? So if you're not used to having these conversations or talking about pronouns or knowing the terms LGBTQ plus, even just having those little symbolic things in your office can open conversations that you can learn a lot from your clients as well. Vanessa and I have gotten really good about sharing our name and our pronouns, right? Because we do this day in, day out. But practice with your coworkers, practice with your peers or family members or your partners or your support system, of starting with that, right? Of saying your name and then your pronouns. And it will open up conversations. And that's one way to help people feel like, all right, America shared her pronouns. That means that she has some kind of idea, or she can be some kind of a safe person or an affirming person that I can also share my pronouns with. It just allows conversation to take place, and then it allows for the youth to be curious, have questions as well, which you can use as a learning opportunity or teaching opportunity for them, and learning opportunity for you as well.
Can I add something real quick?
Yes.
It's also a great way. Yes, of course, our LGBTQ plus youth, it will make them feel safe and affirmed. But then also I'm thinking about kids that maybe they're not out. And they might not even tell you. But just seeing that rainbow flag, it tells them, okay, that is a safe person. So you never really know who it's going to make feel safe. They might not even tell you, but they still might have that experience.
All right, thank you, Vanessa. So I have here, do not make assumptions, always ask and be curious. To engage a youth around their gender identity, be inquisitive just as you normally would with any child. I've worked with I consulted and worked with so many providers that say, well, I don't want to ask how they identify or what their sexual orientation is or what their pronouns are, because I don't want to be disrespectful. I don't want to make them feel a certain way. By not asking and just assuming, you're being disrespectful, right? So taking a different look at that and being more curious about who you're serving or how you're showing up and the people that you're serving. Here are some possible statements or questions that you can use. You can always say, my name's America and my pronouns are she, her, ella. You can also say, what name would you like me to use when I refer to you? So if you're not comfortable and you haven't practiced saying your pronouns or asking other people their pronoun, you can always just say, hey, Vanessa, how would you like me to refer to you as we work together? I want to be respectful of you, and I want to be called America, and if you want to use she, her pronouns for me, that's how I go by. How would you want me to address you? How would you want me to call you, right? What pronouns do you use? You can always just ask directly. And what else would you like me to know about you? Instead of saying and assuming, hey, Vanessa, do you have a boyfriend? Right? You can always just say, hey, do you have a special person in your life, or do you have a partner, right? Using more gender neutral language. And again, this is not easy if this is not our quote unquote norm that we use, right? It does take practice. Like it says in here, practicing introducing yourself with your own pronouns, wearing a pronoun pin, using gender neutral language, and with younger children, making sure that the conversations that you're having with them, a 5-year-old comparison to like a 12-year-old can look very different according to their developmental age.
And also say too, like when you ask a youth, you can ask, is there anyone you have a crush on? They might be really excited to talk about it. If you ever think about having a crush and you just want to gush about them, that's a great opportunity to, let a youth tell you about their feelings. Like, is there anybody that you like? Like, what do you like about them? Anyway, I just wanted to add that.
Yeah. So when is it okay to ask about sexual orientation? To engage a youth around sexual orientation, use this rule of thumb. If you wouldn't ask a child if they are dating because they are too young, don't inquire about their sexual orientation. Typically, children 12 and above, but not always, you can ask about sexual orientation. At this age, they're already feeling, they're already having butterflies in their tummy or wanting to be if you remember about your first crush, right? Like Vanessa's talking about, you think of like, who did you get all giggly about or sitting next to in class, or who did you share your bag of chips with, or who were you super embarrassed to like talk to at school? They happen around this age. So just think about, that rule of thumb. And again, just the tips about wearing your pronoun pin or an ally pin, or getting used to using gender neutral language. You can also ask when inquiring about sexual orientation, or when asking a youth about sexual orientation, is tell me a little bit about your friends, like Vanessa was saying. Do you have a special friend? What makes them special? What do you like about them? Are you dating someone? Tell me about them and what do they like? How long have you known each other for? Where did you meet, right? Are they respectful of you and do they treat you right? Just like you would ask any other youth who's not LGBTQ+. So meeting the youth and admission intake. So here's a couple of tips that you all can take with you. When entering information, making sure that in the intake you do identify the legal name of the youth. Sometimes I know doing clinical work or doing documentation or putting a youth into the system, the way that they're looked up is by their legal name, but also making sure that you're including their chosen name. So what name are they going by? Entering their pronouns, and also gathering SOGI data, right? So sexual orientation and gender identity. How are they identifying, and asking these questions? So you're not making assumptions or assuming that they're falling under a certain category. All children and youth being admitted should be asked the same questions. Again, just because a youth is identifying as LGBTQ+ doesn't mean that you're just going to ask them these questions, right? All youth should be being asked these questions, even if they're not part of the LGBTQ+ community. We're missing out on being a more affirming provider if we're assuming that somebody doesn't need to be asked these questions, right? It's like what Vanessa said in the very beginning, we all have a SOGI, no matter if we're part of the community or not. Practice asking these questions. They're not easy. They're not easy, right? So I just want to normalize that. Asking somebody about who they are attracted to or how they identify can be very uncomfortable if you're not used to asking these. But remember the statistics that I shared with you on why this information is super important. Just by asking these things to every youth that you're serving, you're actually putting down those statistics and you're saving lives, right? These are youth that are attempting to take their life because they're not being asked who they are. They're not being a chance to show up in the world authentically and feel seen and feel heard. When welcoming children and youth, tell them about your non-discrimination policies. If you do not know in your agency what these non-discrimination policies are, I would go back and look them up and have them handy, because there's going to be something there that is protecting our LGBTQ plus youth. Youth in foster care have a youth have a foster care Bill of Rights, and in the Bill of Rights, these are some that we pulled out of those Bill of Rights, and they are protecting youth around sexual orientation, gender identity, and expression. So I'll just read a couple of these. Foster youth have a right to participate in extracurricular, cultural, racial, ethnical, personal enrichment, and social activities, no matter, right, their maturity, developmental age, and sexual orientation and gender identity and expression. So they have a right to participate in whatever they want, no matter their SOGI. They have fair and equal access to all available services, placement, care, treatment, and benefits, no matter their sexual orientation, gender identity, and expression. It's listed here on their rights. If you haven't seen these before, also please take a moment to go through the Foster Care Bill of Rights. Sexual orientation, gender identity, and expression are listed in there, and it protects youth that are part of the LGBTQ plus community. Us as service providers, we might not always know this, but this is a way to advocate for our children, and also be able to help them understand that no matter how they authentically are identifying, they have a right to everything else of their peers who are non-LGBT plus. Vanessa, do you want to add anything, or?
Yeah, actually, there's a really great resource to advocate for our LGBTQ plus youth at school. It's called a gender support plan. And it's a form, you can find it. And if anybody wants it, you feel free. Our emails are going to be here. You can email us and we'll send it right over. But it's a form that really lays out in detail how that youth or how the school should react and agree, everybody agreeing on how is the school going to treat instances of bullying. How is if that youth doesn't feel comfortable in the locker room, who are the safe adults in the school? If that youth is using a binder for the first time, that's something to bind the chest. Some trans boys use that. If they're using it for the first time and they feel uncomfortable, maybe they need help taking it off. Who do they go to at school if they're in class and they're feeling it, they can't breathe? So that form like really illustrates that, and if you can put it in part of the IEP, if there's an IEP, and then that becomes part of the legal document. So I just wanted to share that tool.
Thanks, Vanessa. Gender-affirming medical care is life-saving medical care. LGBTQ, I don't know what happened to my screen. LGBTQ plus youth in foster care have the right to access medical and mental health providers who have expertise meeting the needs of LGBTQ plus youth. First and foremost, gender-affirming medical care is between the patient and their medical provider, and decisions are not made overnight. So this is a process, right? And this is something that is consistently being worked with the patient and their medical provider, right? At least me as a licensed marriage family therapist, I have no say in this part, but we do need to find gender affirming care for those that are needing that type of care. Every person's gender journey is unique and different. So just because you have been of service to a youth who is going through maybe medical transition or has seen a gender affirming medical provider does not mean that they're going to go through the same process, right? Just always remember everybody's journey is different. Gender journey is different. There's three different types of transition. There's social transition, which involves pronouns, names. There's legal transition, which say I used to use she pronouns and now go by he, and my name used to be America, but now go by Mike. And I want to change like my social security card, my ID, or anything like that. That would be legal transition. That would be changing my legal documents to be able to address me the way that I'm identifying as. There's medical transitions, which involve puberty blockers, hormones, and surgeries, but not always do. For example, folks that are trans identified go through medical transitions, or they don't have to go through all these transitions. So that's super important to keep in mind. Other things to consider in supporting someone's gender journey is bathrooms, right? Vanessa, I think you mentioned like having just boys and girls bathrooms. Is there a gender neutral bathroom at their school? Or at the library they go and do their homework after school, or at their wraparound after school program? Do they have a place to feel safe in whatever bathroom they want to use? Hygiene. There's eating disorders, menstruations, hair removal, gender affirming voice therapy, gender affirming garments. Vanessa talked about binders. I think it was you, Vanessa, who had a client who wanted gender affirming voice therapy. Was that you, or maybe Santana? No. I remember having to look for a resource because we had a client in our YAP program, our Youth Acceptance Project, that wanted to do affirming voice therapy because they wanted their voice to sound more deeper, right? Because they were going through their transition and their voice didn't make them feel comfortable in the voice that they had. So those resources are out there. And if you all ever come across a question or need help in finding a resource, I know Vanessa has also gathered a lot of resources for our LGBTQ plus youth in different counties. So you just reach out to us and let us know.
Yes, please do, because if it's something we don't have, it actually really helps us to build our library. And then I just want to say there was a comment that came up at the end of the previous slide. LAUSD, LA Unified School District, I think that means, has a great model for that. This is in regards to the gender support plan that called out for safe schools. Safe adults identify themselves with special rainbow badges.
Yes. I have to share, when I used to work for the LA LGBTQ plus center, that was going into place. And yes, I remember those little badges that the LA Unified School District teachers used to come out and say like, hey, I want to be an ally, or I want to be in support of being that safe person at the school on campus. And it was, I don't know if it changed now, but it used to be a black badge with like the rainbow. And this is out for schools. So it was pretty cool. I'm glad whoever brought that up. I wish more cities and counties did that. I'm not sure if they do, but that's great. So the importance of involving the families of LGBTQ plus children and youth. So recognizing barriers to permanency and child welfare. Child welfare systems take away Black and Brown children at a disproportionately higher rate compared to white children, and are then reluctant to send them home. I do a lot of this work in our permanency program. We see a lot of Black and Brown children being taken away from their biological families, and we're thinking of permanency, right? And being able to help these kids and families go back to their family of origin, right? Their biological family. So there's a lot of work being done there around permanency. And the reality has been, right, that it is our Black and Brown children who are disproportionately being not sent back home. Structural racism and LGBTQ plus stigma increase the risk that LGBTQ plus youth of color will enter these systems. The child welfare systems treat youth of color differently than white youth around diagnosing, medication, culturally relevant responses, criminalizing families of color. So we see this happen within our systems. Once in the system, LGBTQ plus youth of color tend to remain longer and face greater risk of discrimination and violence compared to their peers. We heard in the video, right, one of the youth saying that they were, I think, in a foster family who didn't want them because they were part of the LGBTQ plus community. And we see that happen, right? Families saying, you know, I don't want a gay kid in my home, or I don't want a trans kid in my home because I wouldn't know how to support him, or I don't believe in that, or I'm super religious, or whatever the barrier is to affirm that kid in that home. But we got to start start supporting families to feel like they can support our LGBTQ plus youth of color in their home. Historically, LGBTQ plus children who left their first family due to not being accepted were rarely given the opportunity and support to reconnect with their families. Instead, they got saved by the system, which they were put in shelters, group homes, or other source of placement. So why can't LGBTQ youth have permanency plans that involves their families and their communities? Well, they can, right? We just have to start. We have to start changing that, and it starts with us, right? It's how we become more affirming and accepting, and how we're supporting families to better affirm their kids at home.
And that's what the Youth Acceptance Project is developing that permanency. And to expand on the idea of permanency, it's more than just where that youth lives. That's about having trusted long-term relationships with adults and peers in their life that can create relational permanency that's lasting.
Thank you, Vanessa. So family experiences of child welfare and practicing cultural humility. The impact of systemic racism, which implies that BIPOC families cannot take care of themselves, and therefore the child welfare system is there to quote unquote help or quote unquote correct them, which is the white savior complex. Working with families who have experienced the child welfare system must include listening to and honoring the family's experience. Taking the time to get to know where the family's coming from, right? Getting to know what the family needs in order to feel more supported. Families are their own expert. A lot of the times that the families that we work with have had really bad experience with the system, with the child welfare system. So just coming in a space where the families are the expert or know more about their families than we do, that even just takes a step back, and right, and letting families know, like, I'm here not to judge you, I'm here not to correct you, but I'm here to get to know you to help you better support your child. Because the ultimate goal is to bring your child back, right? Do not be afraid to ask what experiences families have had with the systems, whether they're positive or negative ones. Children and families experience ambiguous loss. A lot of the families that we work with have to deal with loss of losing of their children being taken away, or losing of their kid and their ideas of maybe their kid being straight and now they're part of the LGBTQ plus community. Families who struggle to accept or support the LGBTQ plus youth still love their children. Doing the YAP work, or the Youth Acceptance Project work, which I'll talk to you in a little bit, we noticed that finding that common ground with families has helped in getting families to come to a more affirming place, right, with their kid. Ultimately, families love their kids. And if we could get to that same feeling, or that goal in mind, we can better support the youth and the families together. Children want to grow up and be loved by their families and their own communities. And remember, you don't have to understand someone to have compassion for them. Again, just repeating what Vanessa had said earlier. So we know, let me just check on time. Are we good? Yes. So we know that families of LGBTQ plus youth, they experience and they come across barriers around their culture or society norms. We worked with families who are very religious, or have religious values and beliefs that don't accept LGBTQ plus within their morals, their values. There's a lack of knowledge and myths about the LGBT community. There's a desire for their child to have a quote unquote normal life. There's fear for the youth, fear of like hate crimes, community violence, bullying, Vanessa talked about. There's grief of not parenting the child that they thought they had, right? I share an experience with that, right? Like coming out to my very strict Mexican Catholic mom and dad, right? Coming out as lesbian. My mom was grieving that. She said, "Oh, that means I'm not going to have grandkids." That's the first thing she told me. Grieving something, that this idea that she would have grandkids because she wanted me to get married to a man. Well, I have two beautiful daughters now, and she got to experience that, right? So just to show her, right, that there could have been a lot of support or a lot of information that my mom could have received around that specific grief. There's guilt. that they cause their child to be LGBTQ plus. A lot of parents that we work with have this sense of, what did I do to make my kid gay, or what did I didn't do that I could have done to prevent my kid from being LGBTQ plus. There's possible isolation from family, community, and church. I work with a lot of families who say, there's no way I can love my kid for who they are, because then I'll lose my family, I'll lose my church family, I'll lose my community. There's some families that don't have anybody, no family members here, because they've moved from El Salvador or Mexico that I worked with, and they have no one. So them fearing and isolating from who their support system is, because they're afraid of rejection from that support system.
This is something I've noticed across the board with parents I work on all different levels of being able to accept their children, some having more difficulty than others. But what I've heard a lot from parents that are struggling to accept their children is that they don't know their child. I feel like I don't know who they are. I feel like they're further and further away from me. And that's all the way from parents I've worked with who are affirming and maybe even part of the LGBTQ community. I've heard that from a parent. And then I've also heard it from a parent that's very strict, very not accepting. So I just wanted to add that.
Thank you. So now I'm going to tell you about the Youth Acceptance Project. Vanessa and I have talked about it a little bit already, which is the program we work in. And the Youth Acceptance Project works with family to bring kids back to their family, right? To get them to that affirming place and love their kid, no matter how they're identifying. Just trying to see time. I'm going to skip the video, Vanessa, so we have some time to answer questions too. So what is YAP, the Youth Acceptance Project? We call it YAP just because it's easier than saying the Youth Acceptance Project, so you'll hear me say that. So YAP is a clinical intervention that was developed by family builders in Oakland to meet the specific needs of LGBTQ plus youth and their families, whether they're in and out of home care or they're still with their families, so at risk of being removed from their families. YAP is a kin first distinct solution focused, strength-based and trauma-informed family engagement intervention steeped in cultural humility for caregivers struggling to affirm their LGBTQ plus youth. So we work both with the caregivers and the youth. The goal of YAP is family preservation, family reunification, and those improving permanency outcomes for LGBTQ plus youth. Parental support is essential as a protective factor. So we're really focused on supporting the caregivers to get to a place where they can use pronouns or use names or better affirm and love their kid. We have here families can and do change. We work, like Vanessa just shared, right? We work with a lot of non-affirming families or caregivers that just cannot get to a point where they can affirm their child or support their child around their LGBTQ plus identity, right? But we also seen families come around and do change and get to a point where they get their kids back in home, or they are able to keep their kids in a safe, loving home with them. Oops. So what do the YAP social workers do? What do the YAP advocates do? We work directly with caregivers and youth separately to provide emotional support and improve communication. So we meet with the caregivers and the youth, and we talk about what they're going through, right? So maybe the caregivers are having a really hard time around their kids' sexual orientation or the way that they're expressing their gender, right? The way that they're dressing, or maybe the kid is painting their nails and they're not okay with that. So we really provide that space for caregivers to a non-judgmental space, right? Where we meet caregivers where they're at and listen to what they're struggling with away from the youth. And we give that space to the youth as well. We listen, we meet the families where they're at. We listen, validate, and help process parents' feelings away from their children. We lean into talking about religion, culture, race, to help build rapport and understand the family. We provide accurate information about SOGI, sexual orientation, gender identity, to family members and dispel myths and increase understanding. We attend LGBTQ plus community meetings with parents, such as at schools, IEP meetings, maybe it's the PFLAG meetings, family gatherings, medical appointments, if it's a gender affirming medical care, maybe they don't know what questions to ask. So we go and support parents, caregivers around this. We also refer parents and youth to appropriate resources for medical assessments when that's needed. And we help teams make decisions about permanency planning and maintaining healthy contacts with first families. When needed, we provide training on SOGI to county staff, probation officers, foster homes, and group homes. With our YAP work, we do a caregiver advocacy, which is a survey that we give to our caregivers, and we track how affirming they are when they first come into services with us, and then how affirming they are when they end services with us. And what our survey results are is that we've seen an increase in placement stability for the youth. We've seen an increase in caregivers affirming their child's gender expression and behaviors. We've seen caregivers using respectful language when talking with or about their LGBTQ plus child. We've seen caregivers being able to love their LGBTQ plus child and keep their faith. So we're not here to change people's religious beliefs, faith, spirituality, morals, values. We're here to really learn about and come to this common ground of loving their kid. So I like to point that one out because a lot of people think, oh, you're here to make me stop being spiritual, start being religious, but that's not what we're here for. We're trying to really help you keep your support system and also get to a point where you're being respectful and loving to your kid. We've seen an increase in caregivers using their child's chosen name and pronouns. Caregivers' ability to address issues related to gender with their child. Caregivers are advocating for their child at school and with family members, and caregivers talking to their child about gender-affirming medical care. So the youth as well, they have a survey when they come into our program and they end, and youth have reported that they are feeling positive about their future. They say, I do not have thoughts of killing myself anymore, which is great because that's our goal of getting those statistics down. They report my caregiver uses a name and pronouns I want them to use. They're proud of being LGBTQ+. Their caregivers standing up for them in their community, and then they're saying that they have family members who love me for who I am. So YAP services. Family Builders provides direct services to 7 counties in the Bay in California. We also provide YAP training and consultation model to jurisdictions outside of the Bay Area. And as part of the Federal Quality Improvement Center, we were evaluated in other jurisdictions, and we're currently in California, New York, Pennsylvania, Ohio, and 2 sites in Missouri. And through our intensive multi-day training, clinicians and social workers learn to deliver trauma-informed LGBTQ+ competent services, which are seeped into cultural humility to families of LGBTQ+ and youth. The training is followed by ongoing bi-monthly follow-up coaching and consultation. So we're constantly supporting you through the process, and we're continuing our evaluation through the CARES policy research. I think I had the wrong presentation. So this is our boss, Vita Kavar. You can also write down her information, but Vanessa and I will also put our information. Our information is in that PowerPoint that Sadie sent over to you all. But I'm gonna go ahead and stop sharing, and we have a couple minutes for any questions. We're super grateful for your time, by the way. Thank you for hanging in there with us.
I had a question for the training you were just talking about, the YAP training. If I just reach out to you or Vanessa or to you guys directly, or is there like a website I can go to like to see like how much it costs and like to sign up for it?
Yes, I would reach out to Vida Kavar, but I'll put her information, Erica, in the chat. Thank you.
Perfect. Thank you.
Yeah, she'll be your direct contact. And I love your flag in the back. You see, little things that
Thank
count.
you. Yeah, I have the bi, and then I have a lesbian one right here, trans, and then on my door I have just the rainbow one.
I
So.
love that. Thank you for doing that.
Oh, we have a comment or a question. How would you develop a conversation with a teen client who's wanting more information on gender and sexual identity?
Yeah.
That's great. Yeah. I would start by when they come to you, so you're already having an idea that they might want some more information, I would really leave it open to them and say, you know, I'd really like to, you know, give you some information, or I really want to hear what you're thinking about. Can you tell me what's on your mind? Just leaving it very open for them to share. And then, you know, based on what they share, you'll be able to find more information. There's actually, I'm going to put it in the chat. There's a really good online guide that's specifically for teens. It's called the IMI guide. I'm going to put it in the chat in a minute. I'm just going to confirm that I have the right website. But it actually has like self-care tips. It covers stigma. It covers exploring identity, questioning. So I'm going to put that in the chat.
Thank you, Vanessa. Good question.
It's a big long link, but here it is. And it's called the IMI guide. If you just Google IMI guide, it's there as well.
Does anyone else have any questions or last minute thoughts?
Sadie, thank you so much for all your support in setting this up. I appreciate you. Oh, you're on mute.
I'm on mute, sorry. I appreciate the both of you so much. Thank you for spending your morning with us and just educating us. So
Yes.
thank you.
Thank you so much for having us. It was a real pleasure to be able to do the presentation with y'all. And thank you so much for all the great questions. There, I did see one more question. Where is that? Thank you. And a teen who wants more information on trans and surgery, hormones, reach out to us via email, and I will send you some more specific info. Please do.
Have a good day, everyone. Thank you.
Thank you. Have a wonderful day, guys.